Welcome on the cosmic atom, there is a silent moment, almost imperceptible, when you no longer recognize yourself as the same individual. It does not proclaim itself with pomp or revelation. It whispers. One morning, you wake up to see a stranger in the mirror who seems to be more familiar than the face you've worn for years. The old fears that previously filled your thoughts now seem remote and strange, as if they belong to someone else completely. What you're going to learn will distress you, because once you see something, you can't unsee it. Once you realize what has been going on under the surface of your mind, every connection, emotion, and decision you've made will suddenly make perfect, terrible sense. There are unseen forces at work in your life today. Patterns you've been repeating without realizing why. Emotions that drive your choices in ways you've never seen before. A version of yourself that has been silently disappearing while you weren't watching. What occurs next will either shatter the delusion you've been living or indicate that the illusion has already begun to crumble. The issue is, are you prepared to discover what has been concealed in plain sight? You're not here by chance. Something within you, something subtle but strong, drew you to this video at this exact time. And at the end, you'll realize why this isn't simply a coincidence in your life. This is a call from inside, a subtle nudge from your spirit that has been leading you without fanfare or show. Because transcending your old self does not require a loud and spectacular makeover. It does not arrive with pyrotechnics or great statements. It's something modest and nearly undetectable, a quiet voyage that occurs within. It is not about becoming someone fresh via exterior changes. It's about releasing what never really belonged to you in the first place. It's about remembering who you really are. This sort of transition is subtle. It whispers. It's like waking up one day and discovering you no longer belong to the identity you used to hold on to. You no longer identify with the same places, conversations, or aspects of yourself that formerly characterized you. Carl Jung famously said that real spiritual progress does not result from improving your personality. It comes by transcending it, letting go of anything that isn't necessary. Everything was designed as armor or an illusion to help you recall the core of your spirit, the silent, unshakable truth that has always been inside you. One of the first symptoms of this transformation is that you no longer identify with your former experiences. What previously seemed like an essential aspect of your identity suddenly seems remote. It's like viewing an old movie. You can see and recall it. However, it no longer defines you. There's no reason to reject it. You don't experience a sense of nostalgia for it. When you recall it, you feel relieved because you can now watch your trip without having to explain or defend it. You no longer communicate your narrative via the wound. You're not defined by what you have experienced or accomplished. You understand that everything was part of your journey, but you also know with absolute certainty that none of it defines your value. What occurred no longer defines who you are. It also does not restrict your potential. Something new was created in the area that had previously been occupied by shame or pride. A peaceful liberation that enables you to perceive your history as it really is, the past. This emotional distance does not imply detachment. It is about integration. You no longer need others to comprehend your anguish. You no longer seek affirmation for what you've been through. You no longer feel compelled to explain what made you who you are. You just know it. Your silence respects it. That's enough. You realize that the things that used to irritate you once a week in some deep part of your being now pass past you without leaving any wounds. Words that once stabbed you are now dissolved in your awareness. Relationships that formerly held you captive to obsolete versions of yourself begin to loosen their hold. Not because you reject them, but because there is nothing left in you for them to grasp onto. As you transcend your old self, Your emotions no longer dictate your responses, not because you detach from them, but because you learn to distinguish between which parts of you respond in the present and which merely repeat previous patterns. Your personal story starts to alter. The concepts you formerly repeated for survival are no longer present in your head. You're no longer seeking redemption. You do not punish yourself for who you used to be. You just observe and walk ahead, as if something inside you understood that every previous chapter was required to lead you to this point. That profound knowledge does not come from the intellect. It originates from the soul. And it is in this awareness that your old self starts to disappear, not because it vanishes, but because you no longer reside there. And when you quit becoming that old version of yourself, something inside you lightens. You do not forget what you've been through. You just no longer need it as your basis. Your decisions begin to emerge from a freer, clearer place, more in line with who you really are rather than the tale you used to tell about yourself. Self-definition that previously seemed so strong. This is exactly how I am, or I can't change. Begin to blur, not because you oppose them, but because they're no longer appropriate for the person you're becoming. You no longer behave based on the urge to preserve a strong identity. You've discovered that your soul does not need labels to feel alive. Transcending your previous self does not mean destroying it. It's about remembering what was and moving on without dragging what no longer serves you. You cease relying on the person you made to live. You no longer feel compelled to repeat emotional patterns or adapt to areas you've outgrown, and you let go with tenderness. The easiness with which you release without resistance is the most obvious indicator that you are no longer vibrating from your conditioned self. You're starting to live from your authentic self, the one who doesn't need to justify or prove anything, the self that just is. And then something else occurs. Your method of communicating with people starts to shift, and not because you planned it. It occurs naturally. You begin to connect to people from a clearer, more honest position, free of the burdens you've learned to bear yourself. You no longer seek a rescuer. You no longer have to be visible to feel authentic. Your presence is no longer something you trade for in order to avoid being alone. On the past, your relationships were often based on necessity, tacit agreements founded on sorrow, and unconscious emotional exchanges. But suddenly there is room. There is space to breathe. Allow for a time before responding. There is enough space to view without being overwhelmed. When you transcend, you stop repeating the emotional patterns that formerly kept you hostage. Not because the world has changed, but because you no longer base choices on your scars. Your sensitivity will no longer lead you blindly. Your submission no longer stems from emptiness. It results from a state of equilibrium. And this alters everything. Your connections no longer reflect what you need, but rather what you already are. You no longer want discussions to avoid quiet or closeness to get away from yourself. You may finally contribute from a position of plenty rather than one of scarcity. And this is the core of real change. When you no longer have to be anything other than who you are. When your history no longer defines you. When your emotions serve as messengers rather than masters. And your tale becomes a treasure memory rather than a living screenplay. You know you've started to recall who you really are, even if someone doesn't understand you. There is no drama, animosity, or internal rupture since your emotional security is no longer contingent on another person's choice to remain. You no longer place your peace in the hands of others, and that shift, that subtle and unseen alteration, alters everything. When you start to demonstrate emotional independence, you find a sort of freedom that not only liberates, but also provides stability. You're no longer running or clutching. You're just present. That's enough. Your presence, which was previously just a part of who you were, has evolved into your new love language. A love that does not demand, does not plead to be seen, and does not seek return to feel genuine. It's a calmer, deeper, and more authentic love. It does not make empty promises or perform love for validation. It is simply consistent, congruent, and pleasant. Not because it attempts to prove anything, but because it does not have to. You begin to connect from a place of truth, rather than a need to preserve an image or perform a function. You no longer devote energy to talks that do not connect. You also do not keep partnerships that exist only out of habit or history. You are more polished and attentive. Energy automatically filters out what is not accord. And although the procedure may be painful, it also provides relief. It provides clarity. Your former self used to pick between haste, fear of being left behind, and desire to be accepted at any cost. However, you no longer select that path because you have accepted your own quiet. You've learned to sit with it, to greet it like an old friend. You understand that being with someone who does not fully connect with you might be more lonely than being alone. So you stick to yourself, even if it means walking away from what you previously believed was love. You must stop mistaking intensity with truth and drama with depth. You begin to see that what offers tranquility is what genuinely has roots, while what requires continual tension to live is often only a mask of separation. You no longer attempt to force comprehension. You no longer need to persuade anyone of your progress or justify why you can no longer stay in spaces that suffocate your soul. Your vibration, the energy you emit simply by being true to yourself, begins to speak louder than any words and, without intending to, elicits reactions in those who haven't yet crossed their own threshold. Some will leave, others will get closer, but from a different perspective, from honesty, not from need. And you'll be at peace with both, since your relationships no longer define who you are. Your core now determines your connections in this new arrangement. What remains does so because it actually resonates, not because it is compelled to do so. This substantial shift in how you interact with people subtly reshapes your whole world. What seemed to be crucial is now gradually dissolving. And this is not a rejection. It is clarity. Clarity, born from exploring your own darkness in such a manner that you no longer have to project it onto others. Your past self resembles folks who would affirm your value, who would fill your empty gaps with phantom presences and fleeting comforts. But you're no longer accessible for that kind of relationship. You've realized that a meaningful relationship doesn't devour you. It enlarges you. It does not need you to betray your nature. It urges you to experience it more thoroughly. When you begin to connect with this newfound energy, everything changes. Connections become more nuanced, honest, and lighter. The strength of a relationship is now determined by its frequency rather than its loudness or intensity. In that quiet place when two souls may simply live together without explanation, rescuing, or clinging in this new condition, you learn to create boundaries based on love, not fear. And these limits do not separate. They establish order. They manage your time and internal space. You no longer stress yourself attempting to keep something that isn't developing with you. You no longer stay for fear of losing what little is left. You have moved to a different vibration, one that makes no apologies for developing. You no longer feel compelled to seek forgiveness for choosing your truth. And that, in turn, demonstrates that your old self is no longer steering your interactions. Now it's your soul, and your soul only chose what nurtures, lifts, and reminds you of who you really are. From here, you begin to realize the fundamental goal of companionship, not to complete you, but to share who you are already. You no longer seek shelter in others, since you have established your own secure area. In this dynamic, self-sufficient knowledge does not imply solitude. It symbolizes spiritual maturity. You cease holding feelings that aren't yours. You quit absorbing things that others refuse to modify. You no longer fall into the trap of mending people who have not decided to heal on their own. You no longer fall into old routines in which you sought to be enough by being less than yourself. Because you now understand that true love is not a disguised sacrifice. Its presence is without pressure, chainless connection, and it is inside that pure and quiet connection that the most powerful things begin to manifest. You become a mirror of change for others, not because you want to lead or direct them, but because your vibration reaches out. Your sheer presence in a state of coherence starts to disclose realities that others have long hidden inside themselves. Some will appreciate this, while others may object. In any case, you'll be at ease since your relationship is no longer based on duty or obligation. It is based on the freedom to be honestly yourself, and it is in that place that you begin to grasp something fundamental. The deepest and most important ties are those that acknowledge each other's progress rather than those that promise more. That degree of connection can only occur once you've undergone your own personal metamorphosis. You confronted your former self, welcomed it, and released it with love, not rejection, but understanding. You eventually realized that your previous version wasn't incorrect or broken. It was just attempting to protect you in the manner it knew how. However, such protection is no longer essential. You no longer have to hide behind a persona or wear a mask to feel worthy of love. You have ceased trying for acceptance. You're no longer anything but yourself. That's enough. Without effort or seeking favor, your essence starts to glow with more purity than ever before. And in that purity, you find a new kind of connection. It's not about disclosing every wound or telling your story in detail. It is about letting yourself to be recognized for who you are right now, without adornments or pretensions. You no longer bear the weight of old masks. You're no longer outraged by being misunderstood. Being neglected or left behind no longer hurts as much as it used to. That's because your value is no longer determined by how others see you. It exists inside the connection you've established with yourself. A connection that sprang from silence, from lonely evenings when you choose not to fall back into old habits, from the days when you resolved to remain strong, even when there was nothing else to sustain you. From that deep root, your old self softly moves away, not because you want to get rid of it, but because it no longer resonates with you. You may reflect on that version of yourself as part of your past, acknowledging that it did its best with what it knew, what it had, and what it felt was essential to live. But you're no longer surviving. You're creating. And inflexible frameworks from the past have no place in this stage of conscious creation. Now there's room for softness, nuance, and vibrancy without the need to yell. Your soul no longer has to impress, protect, or demonstrate its brightness. It just inhabits it. And from that space, every relationship that remains or enters your life becomes a reflection of this new state of being, a state in which love no longer feels like a burden, but like a support that doesn't invade, where sharing doesn't come from lack, but from fullness, and where choosing someone or something is not about clinging, but about honoring what aligns with. You are now. Your perspective on life shifts irreversibly. You no longer see things the same way you did before. What originally appeared unjust to you is now revealed as part of a larger plan. What you originally saw as errors are now seen as critical times of development and change. You no longer refer to yourself as a victim. Your awareness has grown enough to see that even the most difficult times had a bigger purpose than misery. Transcending your former self entails more than just mending your scars. It entails seeing from a higher perspective, not because it makes you feel better, but because your soul can no longer view through the same lenses. You have inwardly raised your being, allowing you to discern what was previously perceived as chaos, hidden order, quiet lessons, and coded signals waiting to be deciphered. Even your connection with time starts to shift. You're no longer in a perpetual condition of waiting. You do not pursue what flees. You also don't insist on everything happening right now. You begin to live in accordance with the inherent rhythm of your spirit, a cadence that is not accelerated by external forces, but rather governed by internal maturity. In this beat, everything moves differently. Your priorities reconfigure. What formerly seemed so significant suddenly disappears, as do things you previously neglected. Now feel holy. You learn to value silence, respect the pause, trust in the process. Even if you don't comprehend each step, you no longer need promises to go ahead. You just need to feel aligned. And that's all, because you now see that the soul does not need to comprehend everything to progress. It merely has to be in sync with what is seen as truth. This connection to your truth becomes your compass. You cease making choices due to fear of making errors. You cease living to satisfy the expectations of others. Your decisions are no longer a response to a sad history. They are subtle ways to appreciate your present. That small yet significant alteration alters everything about how you view life. You can no longer extract meaning from every circumstance. You've discovered that genuine insight typically occurs after you've let go. With that degree of energy maturity, you cease attempting to control everything. You let go of the urge to get answers from life in the present. You start to live more lightly. And that kindness does not imply weakness or passivity. It indicates polished and quiet strength. Your strength becomes inside and indestructible. You no longer feel compelled to display your method or demonstrate your change to others. Your most honest silence conveys more than words ever could, and this alters how you move around the world. You begin to navigate through your days with more awareness. The slightest moments, little pauses, and subtle gestures begin to have importance. You no longer strive for the next accomplishment or gauge your progress based on what others can see. Now you measure it by how you feel when you get up in the morning and how peaceful you are when you are alone, by the article that resonates with you, even if everything around you is moving. Transcending the old self entails moving beyond your previous limiting identity. Living from a higher level of consciousness without having to leave your body means experiencing a different frequency, a separate condition of being. Without abandoning the world, you understand that it is no longer about responding to life's challenges, but about deliberately selecting how you want to experience your reality. This intentional decision becomes the germ of change. It alters how you connect to every aspect of your life. What formerly seemed like a burden has now become a chance to be fully present. What formerly depleted you now dissolves easily and gently, without struggle or bitterness. While this transition may not be immediately evident to others, it is substantial, long-lasting, and powerful, because you no longer rely on your surroundings to find tranquility. Your inner tranquility is no longer contingent on whether things go your way or not. It stems from how closely your life aligns with your inner being, and internal faithfulness is unavoidable. It becomes your anchor, focus, and guiding truth. The old self judged its value by achieving objectives, receiving acceptance from others, praise, and external validation. But you're no longer pursuing those fantasies. You've found that genuine satisfaction does not come with fanfare. It manifests itself in stillness, in the rhythm of your breathing, in how you pick your words, and in the calm dignity with which you walk away from anything that no longer serves your soul without creating pain or confrontation. You start to perceive difficulties differently. There are no more penalties or hurdles designed to break you. There are thresholds that your soul must overcome in order to awaken the latent elements of itself. You cease running away from them. You confront them with the inside, knowing that they are not here to destroy you, but to expose you. And that alteration affects your energy at the most basic way. Your vibration no longer conveys fear or uncertainty. It radiated truth, a fact that requires no defense, that speaks for itself in your eyes, presence, and silence. And it is at that moment of inner clarity that you know the most fundamental shift did not happen outside of you. It happened inside you. The deepest shift was never about altering your surroundings. It was about viewing life through the eyes of your awakened soul, rather than through the filter of a self that needed to be healed, proved, or satisfied. From that point of awareness, the everyday becomes holy. Not because the world has changed, but because your view is no longer influenced by scarcity or fear. Your look softens, broadens, and fills with appreciation. You no longer need supernatural indications to believe or full confidence to proceed. You start walking with a slower internal beat, not because you've slowed down physically, but because you've stopped pursuing things that were never meant for you. You allow yourself to make alternative decisions, even if no one understands them. You give yourself license to not have all the answers, to not have control, to give room for mystery to emerge, because you now believe that life is working for you. I'm not against you. In that hallowed zone, everything starts to come together. You're resisting less, not accomplishing more. Your frequency becomes a magnet, attracting just what is compatible with who you have become. You no longer need to force cling or shove. What is for you stays. What is not just slips away peacefully and without drama. Even the obstacles that occur tend to take on new forms. They don't go away, but they don't destroy you the way they used to, since you're no longer facing them as the same wounded version of yourself. Now you meet them with a depth that seeks actual knowledge rather than instant solutions, as well as a maturity that tries to stay aligned rather than prevail. You approach life not with urgency, but with presence. You stop trying to be someone and start embodying who you really are. And in that incarnation, everything shifts, not abruptly or rudely, but entirely. And even if no one else notices, it completely alters everything. Because when your energy corresponds to your truth, your world starts to react in the same manner. There is no turmoil. There's no struggle. Only synchronicity. Only clarity. Only the gentle voice inside you that communicates without words. That simply reminds you of all you've always known. You're no longer the same person you were before. You've reached a higher level, and the transcendence is not proclaimed. It is embodied. It is sensed in quiet. Only the depth of your presence will make you stand out. There is no one moment when everything clicks. There is no designated arrival place. One day, you just realize you're no longer reacting in the same manner. Things that used to harm, you can hardly reach you anymore. You no longer go through life fueled by the urgency that formerly defined your inner world. You've changed, not only on the surface, but at the core. And such a fundamental transformation does not need a name to be genuine. You may sense it in how you hold yourself, in how you choose tranquility above performance. It demonstrates your capacity to sit in stillness without fear, to embrace unpredictability without losing your core, and to live from the essence without embellishing it. Your energy is no longer dispersed in 1,000 ways. It consolidates, aligns, and transforms into a current that travels not under pressure or expectation, but from a source inside you that has no name and requires no explanation. This source, this guidance, is derived from a deeper relationship than your identity, labels, and past. You no longer exist to uphold an image. You exist to convey an essence. That essence has always been with you, patiently waiting while you were busy pursuing, proving, and surviving, waiting for you to quit focusing on the same diversions. And you did. You let go. You decided differently. You went ahead, and without recognizing it, you transcended it, not as an accomplishment, but as the inevitable outcome of choosing honesty above habit, of being true to yourself. While stillness was more difficult than noise, staying by your soul while turning around would have been easy. That old version of you no longer has power, and in its stead is someone authentic, calmer, and more like you than ever before. A fresh chapter starts from this real point of view, not a reaction, but a presence-based response. You no longer seek approval since you have recognized your own value just by being. You no longer want to belong since your soul has realized that its ultimate home has always been inside. Life is no longer a race. It becomes a holy unfolding, not because everything is wonderful, but because you've stopped opposing what isn't. You greet each moment with a calm that comes from reconciling with the present. Your days are no longer a series of repetitions. They become a live embodiment of your new frequency. Every word you say, every look you give, and every step you take bears the imprint of someone who has chosen to live from their heart. And that imprint, while invisible, has an undeniable impact, because a soul that has transcended its old self does not need to move mountains to transform the world. Its very presence brings healing. It's a subtle medication, a reminder that living in alignment is not only possible, but also effective. It demonstrates that healing is not a myth, that letting go does not mean forgetting, and that becoming does not imply abandoning who you were. It entails respecting the path and acknowledging that each step prepared you for today, for this moment, for this now. And now that you're here, your vibration speaks for you, and the world listens. If this message strikes a chord deep inside you, it is not a coincidence. Your spirit knew it beforehand. It was only waiting for you to recall it. Remember yourself, because overcoming the old self is not the goal. It's the beginning, a beginning in which you finally return to yourself, free of fear, masks, and weight. Jung famously said that enlightenment comes not from envisioning figures of light, but from making the darkness aware. And those simple words contain a fact that most people spend their lives evading. Because confronting your darkness, identifying your shadow, is one of the most scary and freeing experiences a person can have. This is not a poetic metaphor. It's a raw, often painful process of peeling back the layers of who you thought you were, only to reveal the aspects of yourself that you worked so hard to ignore, conceal, or deny. However, if you're listening to this right now, it is because something inside you has already changed. You've passed an unseen line, and you no longer dread the dark corners of your mind. You've decided to quit running. Have you ever ventured to go deep and address the scars, memories, habits, and emotions that formerly held control over you? That is not a tiny step. That marks the beginning of actual change. You see, the shadow is not something to be removed or obliterated. It is not your adversary. A part of you has frequently waited in quiet. Your acceptance and affection, making the darkness aware, entails learning to perceive it. Finally, give a name and incorporate it. And when you do that, something amazing occurs. The portions of you that previously seemed broken have become the wellspring of your greatest insight. Pain becomes a teacher, while fear becomes a compass. Chaos becomes a portal to clarity. You traveled that route. You've grabbed your shadow by the hand and said, I see you. I know you're there, and I'm ready to listen to you. That demands bravery. That demands strength. And most individuals avoid this voyage for the rest of their life. However, you did not make your shadow a bridge rather than a burden. And now you navigate the world from a place that seems more grounded, authentic, and real. And if this place has been a companion for you on that trip, if the words you've discovered here have struck a chord with something old and familiar in your spirit, you must be aware of this. You do not walk alone. You're part of something far bigger, something that goes beyond language and time. It is a communal awakening, a shared memory. Others, like you, are rising from illusion and embracing honesty, choosing present over perfection, completeness over avoidance. So, if your heart feels compelled to keep investigating, to keep discarding the false and embracing the genuine, join us. Keep going, because every step you take inner echoes outside. Every time you choose truth over comfort, darkness over denial, light emerges. It is not a make-believe scenario. It is not pushed, but emerges organically. You're not the same person you were before, and you're not alone. You're never incomplete. You are never too big or too little. You are merely sleeping, dreaming someone else's idea of who you should be, wearing someone else's agony as if it were your own skin, and uttering someone else's anxieties as if they were your own. But now you recall that something basic has changed in the gap between your thoughts. The old you, the one who sought affirmation in empty rooms, held scars like trophies, and confused intensity with closeness. That individual is gradually reverting to their natural state, a lovely and crucial part in your own development narrative. What remains is what was always there, lurking under the cacophony, pure, unwavering, and free. This does not mark the end of your change. This is when you understood change was never the aim. You're not becoming someone new. You are finally unapologetic about becoming yourself and the world. The actual reality, not the one created by fear and projection, has been waiting for you all along. Welcome home. And if these words have sparked something inside you, if you believe this trip is in line with the quiet truth you have deep within you, I encourage you to stick near. This forum was established for souls like yours, who are willing to choose a new route, one with deep presence and inner clarity. If you haven't already, please take a minute to subscribe, not only to a channel, but to a shift in awareness. Because every video, thought, and experience we offer here is intended to encourage your path and remind you of who you really are, beneath all the noise. Subscribe, and let's continue on this route. Dear viewers, your support through Super Chat and membership is the only source of income that keeps this channel running. If you want me to continue uploading valuable content without delays and to stay motivated in providing you with the best wisdom, I need your help. Every contribution, big or small, makes a huge difference. Feel free to donate and support Pure Wisdom so we can keep growing together. Your generosity keeps this journey alive. If you're enjoying the content on Pure Wisdom and find value in the messages we share, I encourage you to subscribe. Based on the latest analytics, 93.9% of viewers are watching without subscribing. By subscribing, you not only stay updated with new content, but also support the channel's growth, allowing us to continue spreading wisdom for the chosen ones. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an important message. Let's build this community together.